Good evening. Welcome everyone to the special closed session meeting for Monday, July 22nd, 2024. I call the meeting to order at 6 p.m. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Claudia Arona.
Here.
Councilmember Elizabeth Arona.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Here.
Mayor Infante.
Here. Please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Repeat with me.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so there does not appear to be any public communications. So we will, do you want to define what the closed session is, please, Madam Attorney?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the city holds this closed session on existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D1 regarding the existing litigation titled In Re Aqueous Film Forming Foams Products Liability Litigation, MDL number 218MN2873 RMG, including cases titled City of Camden et al. Versus 3M Company, number 223 CV03147 RMG, and City of Camden et al. v. EI DuPont de Nemours and Company et al. Number 223 CV03230 RMG, City of Camden et al. Versus Tyco Fire Products LP et al. Case number 224 CV02321 RMG, and City of Camden et al. v. BASF Corporation number 224 CV03174 RMG. Thank you. 5 times fast. Yes, here I go.
Can we please recess to closed session? We have reconvened from closed session. Madam Attorney, if you would give us the results, please.
Yes, thank you. From the closed session, the City Council directed staff to submit a claim form to recover monies as class action members in the class actions listed in the closed session item, specifically for that multi-district litigation for aqueous film forming foam products liability litigations. And this constitutes acceptance of a final settlement agreement, given that this is a class action with a final approved settlement agreement approved by the court. So these are reportable actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, I will adjourn the closed session. We will reconvene with the regular session in 4 minutes. We're on. Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to the regular Monday meeting of July 22nd, 2024. I'll call the meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Claudia Arona.
Here.
Councilmember Elizabeth Arona.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Here.
Mayor Infante.
Here. Mr. Jamie Baker, if you'd lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please, I'd appreciate it.
Please stand, place your right hand over your heart, repeat after me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jamie. Okay, so we don't have any proclamations. We have a couple of presentations. The first one is the SBC Youth Poet Laureate, Jasmine Guerrero. Please come up to the front. We'll turn the microphone on, I believe.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Jasmine Guerrero Sevilla, and I am here today to read Soy Morena. Before I continue with my poem, I would like to thank my teachers Michelle Pittenger, Siga Musio, and my junior year English teacher Melanie Dickey. It is because of them, Urban Word, and many other people involved who have given me this wonderful opportunity to do this amazing program. I am blessed to be here, to have the chance to share my voice and help encourage the youth to find their voice in a world where it is heard as a whisper, including those who have been continuously shunned and taken advantage of simply because of the color of their skin. Through workshops, readings, projects, collaborations, and other events, I hope to inspire, bring awareness, not only to this program, but to my people who have struggled in the sun, and lead with a warming heart. And now I will read Soy Morena. Tengo 18 años y soy morena. Mi cabello es hermoso de color chocolate oscuro. Mis ojos son color miel. Ay, como amo mi piel. Soy morena y me encanta usar mis aros. Cuando me los pongo me veo un reflejo de mi mamá. Me hace sentir tan bonita. Una simple pieza de joya puede cambiar toda tu apariencia. Por eso cuando la gente me miran con miradas interrogativas. Entonces me los quito y escondo mis orejas. Soy morena y estoy enamorada del arte del sonido. Cuando toco mi música favorita, veo un reflejo de mi papá. Me hace sentir tan fuerte. Mi cuerpo se enciende en una llama de alegría, pero ellos me miran asustados. Entonces lo apago y mi llama desaparece con la música. Soy morena y todavía no entiendo por qué no me aceptan. En esta piel he logrado muchas cosas gracias a Dios. Puedo hablar 3 idiomas, 2 con mi boca, 1 con mis ojos y mis manos. Tengo 30 premios colocados en mi habitación. Tengo 3 trabajos, juego baloncesto, puedo cocinar y limpiar, puedo tocar 8 instrumentos y leer partituras. Tomo clases universitarias mientras todavía estoy en la escuela secundaria. Soy la mayor de 4 hermanos. Si puedo hacer todo esto y mucho más, ¿por qué me tratan como si fuera un extraterrestre? Soy morena, no un extraterrestre. Soy morena, and I learned to speak your language. I learned to wear smaller earrings. I learned to click next when my favorite song came on. I learned that you think I'm not capable of living in this free country. I learned that you cannot be around people like me. I learned that you're afraid of my skin, afraid that it matches the soil God used to create the earth, afraid that it matches the bark on tall, towering trees. You callously pick at it, hoping a brighter color will show. I am 18 years old, and my skin is brown. I am 18 years old, and all you see is my skin brown. I would like to give a great thank you to my family and friends who took the time out of their day to be here. Your love and support does not go unnoticed. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for raising me to be the young, strong, independent woman that I am today. Thank you for showing me that it's okay to be hugged in the skin that I am in. City of Solvang, thank you for having me here today and listening to my voice.
Thank you very much. That was great. I appreciate that. Now, marketing and tourism update. I believe we're going to start with,
So we'll start with John. We have a PowerPoint, and we also have information from Anna, who is in the audience, and Leanna and Claudia, who are online from Islet.
Islet.
I always forget. Pronounced, or it's spelled Islet, but I would want to say that. Anyway, I apologize. So John is here to get us updated on our marketing efforts for the last quarter, and then, like I said, the other two groups are here as well. Take it away, John.
Great. Good evening, council members. Mayor Infante, nice to see you all. I know you always, as usual, have a lot on your agenda tonight, so I'll be brief, but I wanted to bring you up to speed on what we've been doing. Starting first with the website. Was the PowerPoint going to?
No, it's not.
If not, I think you all, oh, there we go. So one of the areas that we're under contract with you is the website. And we continue to maintain that, design it, and add new features pretty much on a daily basis. And Candace has been great to work with, as well as Randy. They've been giving us updates. Candace has a really good feel for what's happening in the city, and she shares that with us. And then we turn around very quickly and try to get that updated onto the website. So this can be everything from usual monthly blog posts, the content edit pages that I mentioned. This would be like refreshing the site if a new business comes to town, if we get photographs from a museum or whatever the case might be. We put that on the website and keep that very lively and active. We do fresh banner ads, whether it be for summer lodging specials or perhaps for an event. And we also built a brand new listing directory system added to the back end of the website to help us when we do our listings internally. And we also redesigned the lodging page, the shopping page, and the dining page with a grid-based design that, again, working in tandem with Candace and Randy's office there. And we also completed an image archive organized by keywords, so it's easier for visitors to the site and for constituents to find photographs easily by being with keywords. And we also added vacation rentals as a category for lodging on the website, those properties that contribute to TOT. So with that, I'll just give you a little highlight of the website's sessions. First, this is comparing April through June of last year to this year. So last year, you can see that we had sessions of 184,218. And this time this year, through April through this June 2024 sessions, we had 202,544 sessions, which is 18,328 increases in sessions, and that's just for this last quarter. And then that percentage difference is about 10%. So we increased our sessions by 10% comparing quarter over quarter. Lodging referrals, which again, as the council knows, this is an area that we used for our main call to action. All of our marketing is surrounded by this effort. So we feel like it if we get people in the hotels and other properties, they will fill up the restaurants and do business with all the different businesses and services in the city. And it also, of course, creates TOT for revenue for a general fund. So last year in 2023, we had 7,204 referrals. And this year, from April to June, we had 8,176, which is an increase of almost 1,000, 972. And the difference percentage-wise is an increase of about 13.5% for lodging referrals. And when I say lodging referrals, these people go to the website through our marketing, they click on a particular property, and then that's a referral to that individual hotel. And we can track those specifically to each property, and we do every month. The dashboard, we've heard a couple different times from Candace that this is being very well received by the citizens and the constituency in the town. People do find, once they discover it and learn how it's organized, find it a useful tool in determining, like looking at our marketing that they could tag along with, or perhaps just looking for tracking on different sales tax and city revenue. And just some improvements there. We added Measure U tracking, so it's tracking that extra 1% of sales tax in addition to sales tax in general. We added a reports page to house something like this, like the quarterly reports that we do and all the other vendors that you have. And we added new, it says downloads to the homepage, those really are links, so a lot of different hot links that would come from the homepage to other parts of the website. And just to give you digital marketing updates, this is working in tandem with Anna's company as well as Islet. I have a problem too with that. But we work on monthly meta ads, which are designed predominantly, the theme there is lodging referrals, so it's another way of marketing, getting people to stay in the town. Local hood story creation and monthly e-blasts and blog posts, those all share pretty much the same content. So the month prior, we talked with Candace and Randy, try to figure out what theme we might want to go with, obviously if it's an event coming up or whatever it might be. And then Anna's also helpful in determining that too, and helps us with some copy there. So we're all working in tandem as we promised you, and still working very well together. We also have continued to work on Pinterest, which is another platform in social media, and monthly e-blasts continue to have a really great open rate. And this is, I'll try not to make this too much like a story problem in math because there's a lot of figures here, but I think it would be interesting for you to see, because I know the council is constantly challenged by how you utilize your budget for the benefit of the citizens of Solvang. And so I know advertising, you really want to make sure that it is working for you and that you are getting your money on return. So this is one formula that can be utilized within the industry. And this is looking at the 2024 second quarter, which I already mentioned had 8,176 lodging referrals. And there's a thing called a look-to-book ratio. So that look-to-book means how many people actually booked once they went on the website, they went to that particular property, and then did they book a reservation. And this is a very conservative figure. We have some clients that have a 50% look-to-book ratio, so we felt 30 was fair. So that equals 2,453 reservations, and the normal length of stay is 2 nights. So with that, then you have, if you add 2 nights, you have 4,906 room nights. This is where it gets into a lot of math, but at 225 average, what they call average ADR, average daily rate. So again, we feel this is a pretty conservative number. Right now, you're at about 250. Of course, this is not a yearly figure, so we went down to 225. But we feel that's a fairly good rate to use in this formula. So with all of that math that I just went through, the amount of revenue that went to the lodging referrals to those people who had those referrals was over $1 million. It was $1,103,000. And then reservations made from the lodging referrals, if you lose the 12% for TOT, that generated for the city $134,451 in revenue right to the general fund, and that's just for one quarter. And just to remind, I know we've talked about this before, but it also is good to remember that of the top 10 cities of all of California, Solvang is number 3, most dependent upon that tourism dollar to build general fund revenue. Your Mammoth Lakes and Yonkville are the 2 ones ahead, and then Pismo's down there too at toward the bottom, but that's not a very good bottom to be since it's only, I think, 11 cities up there. So Pismo's another one that is, as you will know, our client who depends very heavily on tourism. And lastly, I'll just give you, we did a spring campaign for the Los Angeles Times, and last time we met, I told you about the program, and so these are some of the results. I won't go through every tactic that we use, but when we do utilize one of the major media sources, whether it be Los Angeles Times or San Francisco Chronicle, it's a variety of tactics, a variety of creative. So we use video, we use social media ads, we use banner ads, we retarget. It's a real suite of different types of marketing tools that we utilize. And one of the things that was the most successful was what they call a social media handshake. And so what that is basically is we shake hands with LA Times' massive social media platforms of their Facebook and their Instagram, and then we intertwine that with Solvang's social media. And this presented over 9,000 clicks just to the website, just with this one tactic alone. So that was kind of the highlight of the program. And just to kind of give you the recap, each of the tactics performed wonderfully with the social handshake, as I mentioned, leading the way. We had a lot of impressions and clicks exceeding industry standards, which we always try to look at our campaigns and see how we stack up with the industry. We always try to exceed that. Every one of the individual tactics surpassed the original impression count. So when we do these campaigns and we negotiate, they give us a guaranteed amount of impressions. And if they don't achieve those, then they give us additional ones to meet that. But in this particular case, especially with the takeover, we had 800% of the impressions more than we had asked for. And even while mainly running billboards and banner ads, the clicks not being the main key performance was the indicator. As I mentioned, the campaign for the social handshake generated over 9,100 clicks to the website. And we saw similar results between, as I mentioned, we had different creative assets. We did photo and banner ads and then retargeting. And I think I shared with you some of the creative that we were going to be doing. This is just some shots. And then if we go to the Los Angeles Times recap, it's a couple more slides. So that's the creative that was utilized, some of it. And then the next slide. This was something I shared with you, a hard copy of this. This was a vacation guide that the LA Times put out, and we were able to secure a full page. The rack rate for that was $15,000. We got it for $5,000 as part of our negotiation. And then lastly, we are now in the process of working with Candace and Randy to determine what we go for our fall campaign, which will probably start toward the end of September. We're looking at the Bay Area News Group as a possibility. Since we already covered the South, we thought we might hit up Northern California. And that Bay Area News Group is the San Jose Mercury News is their principal paper. San Ynez Guide, we committed to the back page again that we did last year, so we're committed to that. We'll be utilizing that for the San Ynez Guide. And then Visit California, we're looking at doing a newsletter sponsorship with them in the fall. And we've had Central Coast Tourism Council. We've had several co-op opportunities that we've taken advantage with them, one being a map, another being in the fall an ad in Sunset Magazine. That's we get it at a reduced rate because we're co-oping that with other destinations. And that's it. Thank you. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, John.
Any
you.
questions from the council?
We also have Anna here, if you don't have any questions for John.
No questions for John? Oh, I mean,
Describe for me, you say a website session. What is a session?
So a session is when somebody comes on the website and they spend a certain amount of time on the website, whether they're looking for lodging or looking for a restaurant or just, it's basically them coming to the website and viewing it.
Okay, so it's a view.
Yes.
Okay, but and for what period of time? Is there a minimum?
It's measured. We have a pretty low bounce rate, which is what you look as one of the industry standards. So we are having people. I think the average time on the site, I'd have to get that for you, but it's been within the industry standards. People do spend quite a bit of time. We find also that our video completions are almost 100%. So people are really liking the videos that we put on too.
thank you very much, John.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Anna, you have anything you want to add? Share? Okay. How about Leanna and Claudia?
Sure.
Or, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Leanna from Islet Agency Social Media. If we have the presentation up again, I was going to skip to the key takeaways page in the interest of everybody's time and share some astounding wins that we have with you all. Starting with the Instagram year-over-year increases, follower growth has increased over almost 400%, 392%, 5,000 new followers over the last quarter versus 1,000 at the same time last year. We also have organic reach that has increased 55% and profile views that have increased 49%. So all of those numbers point to the direction that people are enjoying the content and going onto the page to learn more and find out more information about visiting Solvang. We also saw a spike in followers the day that we had a giveaway with Life Hacks LA. We jumped up 735 followers that day alone. We also had over 18,000 content interactions on Facebook, which is huge because organic reach is very minimal on Facebook. And our top like post this quarter received just under 1,000 likes. And then we were testing out some different content styles for the page with the evolution of the algorithm and how people are consuming social media differently this year versus last year. And that was successful because 3 out of the top 5 posts had mixed both photo and video in that. Do you have any questions?
Any questions from the council? No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay,
That's the end of the presentation, yes.
that's,
And then, I know Sue from the Visitor Center is here as well, so if there's any questions for her.
you want
Or
to say
Candace.
anything?
I don't need to, but if you have any questions, I would love to answer them.
I'll come up with a couple questions I want. Sorry. How's the population been to the visitor center? I saw one of the reports that suggested it was an increase. Oh, thank you. I need that. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so June numbers were up definitely from 2023. I believe it was about 900 on my reports in there. Not looking at it right now, but I think it was up. We are wondering how it's going to look for July because of July's typically the second highest number of the whole year for the visitor center, second to December. So, but because of the fire, it felt like we were having a little bit less in our numbers. So that'll be interesting to see what July looks like when we finish out the month to see like what the total numbers were. Right now, it looks really good. So just yesterday, I believe the total for the visitor center was 467. For a Sunday, that's really good. Typically, Sundays are under 300. Saturdays are usually about 400 in like July in the summertime, 400 and above, between 400 and 500. But Sundays are usually under 3. But we were over 4 yesterday, so that's very good.
Excellent. Anybody else?
Anything else?
Thank you very much.
Okay, you're
Appreciate
welcome.
it. Okay, so now we will go to public communications for non-agenda and consent items. Ms. Berry, if you'd introduce that for the record.
At this time, you may address the council on items not on the agenda and on consent. Time limit is 3 minutes. We will start with in-person public comments first.
The first request I have is from Sandy Mullen. Where'd she go? There she is.
Hello, thank you so much. I won't take much of your time because I know you have a lot of folks here. I am Sandy Mullen, Executive Director of Elverhoy Museum, and I am here simply to say thank you to the City Council for supporting Elverhoy with your generous grant. Elverhoy and the City of Solvang have had a long-standing relationship. It actually extends beyond when the city was a city and before Elverhoy was a museum. So it's a deep and rich relationship, and I look forward to enhancing it and sharing the culture and heritage of the city with you and acting as a repository of the city's history. But thank you. That's it.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. Mr. Al Cortese.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm here on the same subject, same question. At the last council meeting, I reiterated the position of the attorney for the co-owners of the common property of the development in Site C, which the developer wants to take for an entry lane for what we like to call Deadwood. And our position, as I outlined it, is that the city staff should not even be processing the application under the builder's remedy law because the application is void and of no effect and did not vest any rights in the developer. That position was clearly stated in our council's letter to the city attorney dated March 22 and in a follow-up email and letter to the mayor, planning manager, and city manager, copying the developer and the city attorney on April 1 of this year. However, to date, we have received no response to our many requests to the city's, with regard to the city's position. Several months have passed, and we're concerned that further delay could prejudice our legal position. And it is also unfair to the developer who's spending significant time and money on a potentially void application. So tonight, I asked the same question I asked on several prior occasions. What is the city's position with respect to the validity of the application? And furthermore, I request that specifically that the council direct staff to respond. If your procedures preclude responding during this part of the meeting, then I respectfully request that the staff be directed to respond in writing, hopefully to our council this week.
We can't address it here. You know that. It's not an agenda item.
I'm
Thank
sorry?
you very much, Al.
What did you say?
We cannot address it here at this time
that I
because
understand.
it's not an agenda item. It's
Right,
not
I
publicly
understand.
announced. Thank you very much.
That's the latter request.
Yeah, we'll work
Thank
on
you.
that. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak at this time? I don't see anybody on Zoom that looks like they want to speak, so we'll bring it back to the council. So we're ready for a city manager's report, I believe.
You didn't forget me this time.
I never forget you, Randy.
Short and sweet. I received an email earlier today from the county. They're soliciting input for Shape the Experience of Aging. This is through the county's Adult and Aging Network. We posted it on our website and our Facebook page. So I believe we had a presentation here not too long ago about aging and all that. So it's an opportunity to, they're asking to tell us your experiences with aging and disability. Tell us about the experiences of your friends and your family. Your answers will help community leaders make good decisions about resources and services to help us all age well. So I took the test. I took the survey. It took about 5 minutes to fill out, so it's not difficult. And obviously, the more input they get, the better results they get. So I encourage everyone to take a look at that. And like I said, if it's not on our website yet, it will be tomorrow.
Questions for the council?
Randy, is that survey, is it online only?
As far as I know, yes.
Okay, I think that in and of
Well, it does
itself,
say, for assistance or more information, call 805-963-0595, extension 117.
okay. Just
So
that many of our senior populations aren't
Right. Well, it's,
online.
they're looking for anybody, you have to live in Santa Barbara County and age 55 or over, or if you're an adult with a disability, or if you're a family member, friend, or service provider who give care to an older adult or person with disability. So they're looking for a pretty wide range of input.
And the first 20 callers get. What do they hope to do with the information once it's compiled?
It's to help them, it's a survey for the master plan for aging. So it's obviously to help the county gather information, identify when they ask questions about how you feel about the health care. I mean, like I said, I took the survey. How do you feel? Do you feel discriminated? That kind of thing. So it's to help, give the information they need to create this master plan.
And another bureaucracy. Will that be information available, or the survey be available tomorrow?
The survey, yeah, it should be on our, if it's not already on our website, it will be tomorrow.
All right, thank you.
No other questions? Okay. At this point in time,
Thanks.
we need to talk about any report out, council comments and requests. Excuse me.
Just FYI, on Wednesday, I'm going to the annual JIPA meeting on behalf of the city in La Ploma.
Where?
La Palma, probably.
Palma. I probably mispronounced it, but the Palm.
Okay.
I have nothing.
Couple things that I have been doing in the past couple of weeks. I went to the Buellton State of the City to listen to what they were doing and make sure that they understand that we're supporting them and we have a relationship. Went to the Visit San Ynez Valley annual meeting where we saw what they are doing with regard to increasing the marketing for Solvang. And then last Wednesday, Thursday, I went to the SB CAG meeting talking about some of the issues from the Santa Barbara County. Okay, in that case, let's go to consent items. There's no public comment on this. Is there any consent items that the council would like to pull?
Pretty bland.
Yeah, I agree.
I probably
Okay,
need
then
to
can I-
read.
Sorry?
I need to read? I need to
Yeah,
read.
please do. I apologize.
Consent is for routine administrative city matters and is approved with one motion. These items are discussed only on request of council members. Members of the public were afforded an opportunity to speak during the public communications portion of this agenda.
Thank
Move that we approve the consent agenda items A through D.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
Councilmember Claudia Arona.
Yes.
Councilmember Elizabeth Arona.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Yes.
Mayor Infante.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, we have no public hearing, so let's move to item number 8, discussion items. If you'd introduce that to the record, please.
Discussion and possible action to approve residential water disconnection policy to conform with regulatory requirements and make other conforming edits and authorize staff to make any necessary conforming edits to finalize the residential water disconnection policy.
Staff report.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Thank you. So on June 10th, the council adopted ordinance number 240375, which became effective on July 10th. And that ordinance, among other changes to our utility code, specified that the city council will adopt a residential water disconnection policy in accordance with health and safety code sections 1169 foregoing and public utility code sections 10010 and 10010.1. So this is that policy. Staff has gone through and created a residential water disconnection policy consistent with those health and safety code and public utility code provisions. And it outlines how and when and with what notice and with what timing staff can disconnect residents' water should they be delinquent on their payments. Generally, delinquency has to be for at least 60 days before disconnection. Even a disconnection notice can be sent. And the policy provides for a customer to appeal the delinquent bill, and the city manager or designee has the authority under the policy to adjust that the bill if there's found to be an error or there was a leak or the meter was malfunctioning. And then it also provides, consistent with state law, the option for payment deferral up to 2 months, and entering into a payment plan or amortizing the delinquent payments over a 12-month period or less to let that person come back into compliance with their utility bills. There's certain instances where water service can't be disconnected. For example, if they're appealing their bill, we can't turn off their water while that appeal is pending. And there's several other, provisions. Happy to answer questions on any of that. But essentially, we're implementing the ordinance that amended the utility code back in June.
Council, any questions of the staff report?
Is it only for single-family residences that we're talking about for this, or how does it work with hotels or retail or?
So it only applies to residential, but it would apply to multifamily residential as well, but not commercial. So a hotel would not be covered by this.
Okay.
That's a commercial property.
I don't have any public comment requests on this. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to this? I see nobody on Zoom that wants to speak to this. So we'll bring it back to the council for final comments and a motion to approve.
And if I may,
Yes,
Mayor,
ma'am.
we would request that any motion also include authorization to staff to make any necessary conforming edits to finalize the policy. Essentially, we're going to put it up on the website, but the policy cross-references the website links, and so we don't have those yet. And we want to be able to fill in the blanks and make sure we have authorization for that.
So we're approving that the staff fixes things?
If you look at the agenda packet, you'll see there's some, highlighted brackets for filling in links and such. We can do that once we have the link to put it on the website, but because it hasn't been adopted, we didn't create that yet. So it's just a cleanup item.
Chelsea, that's a logistics thing. It's
Yeah.
not a policy
It's
edit,
not substantive, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the motion could be approve as presented in the agenda, and then you cover all of that.
Yes, also that.
Okay, so we need a motion to approve what's in the agenda and include the links that are going to be updated by the city staff.
I'll make a motion to approve the residential water disconnection policy and to authorize staff to make the pertinent changes to the code.
I'll second it. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Claudia Arona.
Yes.
Councilmember Elizabeth Arona.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Yes.
Mayor Infante.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. So let's move on then to 8B. If you would introduce that for us, Ms. Berry.
Discussion and possible action to approve the request for letter of public convenience for necessity for Tony's Smoke Shop at 448 Alice L. Road, Suite B, APN number 139-240-063, transit service.
Staff report, please.
Yes, before you this evening is a item for a letter of public convenience. So the Business and Professionals Code requires that California Department of Alcohol Beverages, or ABC, to deny an application for a license to sell alcoholic beverages at a premise where a higher concentration within a census tract exists. So in this instance, we do have a higher concentration of these type of licenses. So the local governing body, which is you, may determine that the public convenience or necessity would be served by the issuance of a license. The applicant does operate Tony's Smoke Shop, which is located at 448 Alisal Road, Suite B, and the applicant wishes to extend their existing convenience store and include the sale of wine and beer consistent with the Type 20 license issued by ABC. There are currently 11 Type 2021 licenses within the city of Solvang. These licenses allow for the sale of beer and wine to be consumed off-site, not on-site, so meaning they cannot be consumed on the premise. The license types are typically issued to convenience stores, grocery stores, and other similar retail establishments for, i.e., buy beer, wine, and liquor. And then the City Council last approved an off-premise PCN on May 13th, 2024. In your staff report, there was included the applicant's letter to the City Council requesting this a letter of public convenience, and as well as a map showing the nearby licensures that are near the applicant's property. And we are recommending approval of this PCN. And with that, I'll open up to questions from the council.
Thank you, Raphael. Questions of the council? I have just one question. I wasn't sure you rattled through that pretty quickly. Is this a license extension for sale only or sale and consumption?
Just for sale only. Consumption is off-site, so typically that would mean someone's home or back to a hotel room, et cetera.
And Raphael, the other licenses that are on the map, those are of the same type for consumption later, are off-prem?
No, the majority that are on the map are 4142s, which are on-site premise. So typically those are connected with restaurants and or individual just wineries, et cetera. So that's why you see a heavy concentration of 41, 42 licenses on there.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, my only concern was the off-street location, just not exactly right on Alisol there. It's kind of behind the cellar there that exists. And my biggest concern was the security of others, patrons and whatnot. Are there any security cameras or anything else that are part of this plan?
That's a question for the applicant. We don't look at security when it comes to these requests. Again, the premise of the license is for off-premise consumption. So again, it's like, essentially, it's like going to the grocery store. You go, you buy some goods, and then you pick up a beer or wine bottle and you take it somewhere else.
Okay.
There are several hotels very, very close to that location, and the only other place to get something similar would be on Mission Drive further and on Fifth Street further. So I think it'd be a convenience, because you see a lot of the people on the west side on Fifth Street that are staying in the hotels around there, stopping in that convenience store to get a bottle of wine to go back to their hotel room. So I think it would serve the town and that area, part of the town, would serve it well for the people that are staying in those hotels.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am?
I just want to make sure we don't forget about public comment.
Yeah, I know. Thank you. She's always... I don't have any requests for public comment. Do we have anybody in the room that would like to make a public comment on this issue? And I see nobody on Zoom that would like to see
I have one more question.
Yes, sir.
Is the applicant going to keep the same name? No. That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
You're going to change the name to it?
It's not a smoke shop anymore. I had
Okay.
to go through like a process with the ABC to get rid of it.
Yeah. We got to put it on the record.
So I had to go through like a process to get rid of all my smoke shop stuff to go with the ABC, and they basically like told me what I can have at the store and what I can't. So like anything marijuana related is out already. So it's like ready to become a convenience store.
Okay.
Okay.
And if you need me to add security camera, I will be adding security cameras outside, but only on my like area. Can't face it to other people's
Understood.
areas.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Okay, any last comments or questions from the council? In that case, can I have a motion to approve the letter of public convenience?
I'll move to approve item 8B.
Second?
I'll second it.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Claudia Arona.
Yes.
Councilmember Elizabeth Arona.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Yes.
Mayor Infante.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1.
Okay, let's move on to item 8C. If you would introduce that for us, Ms. Berry.
Discussion and possible action to approve amendment number 4 to the agreement with Valley Garbage and Rubbish Company, DBA Health Sanitation Service for exclusive solid waste, recyclables, and organics collection and transportation to disposal and processing facilities and organic sites to address SB 1383 requirements, update the annual rate adjustment methodology, extend the term to June 30th, 2038, and make other conforming edits and authorize the mayor to execute on behalf of the city.
Staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So this is the culmination of a lot of work with staff and Waste Management, which is the other name for the Health Sanitation Services Company. And Waste Management is here tonight and can also help address any questions. But as it explains in the staff report, the need for this Fourth Amendment is coming in large part because of the enactment of SB 1383, which was signed into law in 2016, but the regulations, like CalRecycle regulations that have the meat of the requirements for cities did not become effective until November 2020. And so we've been working since then to implement those. The city's done a lot of things, including, as you may recall, passing a enforcement ordinance for our solid waste part of our code. And this is part of that effort because a lot of the SB 1383 requirements deal with how waste is collected and education and outreach and different aspects of the solid waste, organics, and recyclables services that waste management handles for the city. So there's a lot of moving pieces in some ways, but the city does have what we call a low population waiver, which exempts the city from certain requirements for SB 1383, but not all of them. And that waiver is only, as it is now, is only good until 2027, which is 1 year before our current contract expires with waste management. And so there was a need to reflect, the pieces of SB 1383 that we need to comply with now and set up the contract to fully implement 1383 once our low population waiver expires. The hope would be that we would continue with that low population waiver, but when we applied for it initially, we were kind of right on the cusp. They look at population and the volume of waste that's coming out of your municipality, and especially on the waste volume because of all the tourism that we have, we were right there at the edge. So it's very possible that we won't be eligible for that waiver after this one expires. So we wanted to be positioned well for SB 1383 compliance. And so that's kind of the background of why the city came to the table with waste management. We started discussions way back in May 2023 and have been working through this since then. What you have before you tonight is a proposed Fourth Amendment that would extend the term of the agreement to 2038. It would implement a new annual rate adjustment methodology. So under the current agreement, rates get adjusted by CPI, not every year, but most years. This would implement a new rate methodology that would have a CPI component. This would happen every year. There would be a CPI component that would be capped at 5%. And if CPI increased by more than 5%, they would roll that over to succeeding years and could capture that in succeeding years. And then there's also a diversion and disposal component, and that essentially reflects the increase in actual tipping fees at the different disposal, landfill, organics, waste, and recycling transfer facilities that are pass-through costs for waste management. And so they take both of those components, and there's a complicated, there's an exhibit that goes through how to calculate all of that. And then those two things get weighted together. It starts out as 60-40, but it'll be about that every year, but it will change. They get reweighted, so it always goes back to 100%. And that come together makes like the final rate adjustment. So that's a big change in this. And we can talk about next steps, what that means coming out of this if this amendment is approved. But substantively, the other big suite of changes is that we added a whole section of the services exhibit that deals with services related to SB 1383 compliance. And so that includes, making sure that we have organic service to all residential customers. Under the current agreement, that was optional. SB 1383 makes it so you have to have organic services, organic waste service provided to everyone. And there's different requirements for like reporting, route reviews, record keeping requirements. A lot of that we're asking for waste management's assistance because they collect that data. They have the ability to collect that data since they're the ones out there with the trucks. And we already have like a public education component of our contract, and so there's certain specific education and outreach materials that you have to do through SB 1383. So we're going to incorporate that into the public education piece of the agreement, again, because they're already sending out mailers to the constituents that receive service, and this would be wrapped into that and help the city with our record keeping and reporting requirements that we're required to do under SB 1383. And then while we were in there, we also made a lot of other conforming edits to clean things up and address a couple other issues that were pretty minor, removing inconsistencies and reconciling agreement language. So that is the thrust of it. If this is approved, then the new annual rate adjustment methodology would go into effect, and there would be a rate adjustment for 2024. Because it took so long to get this amendment through, normally rate adjustments would be July 1st of every year. So this one's coming a little bit later. Waste Management agreed to not make this year's adjustment retroactive to July 1st. It would be as of September 2024, and then they're rolling it out in 2 installments this year to kind of ease into this new annual rate adjustment, and that would be half of it would be added in September and the other half in November of 2024 billing cycles. And then starting July 1st of 2025, there would be the opportunity for another annual rate adjustment. But they do have to submit documentation to city staff to show, what the data is for the tipping fees, whether that's actually increasing, what's the CPI increase, and then city staff has 60 days to review that before and discuss and meet and confer if there's any discrepancies before even though it's an automatic annual rate adjustment, we did work in an opportunity for city staff to review the data supporting that adjustment and a process if staff has any questions or concerns about the numbers supporting their annual rate adjustment. And I should say too, if CPI goes down or some miraculous way the tipping fees go down, the rates aren't going to keep increasing. It only captures if CPI and the rates are actually going up. So happy to take any questions. I know it's
a whole bunch, yeah.
Yeah.
You look like you're dying to say something, Mr.
No, I was just going to point out, Waste Management worked with us. When I worked at Glenn County several years ago, we had the county increased the tipping fee, and obviously affected the rates that the Waste Management was a collector there as well. And we had a huge outcry because they retroactively applied it, and it created quite the consternation among the citizenry. So when I brought that up with Waste Management, they voluntarily basically two-stepped this. So again, September and then November, they're not clawing back to July. And, they work with us and trying to ease the impact of this increase to our citizens. So I applaud them for that.
Thank you. Council, questions of the staff report?
Yeah, I do have a question. I see that the agreement is going to be extended until 2038. Yeah, that's quite a lengthy time. So I'm wondering about why you're recommending to stick with it and make a long agreement rather than to go out to bid after a certain period of time.
So we recommend going forward with the Fourth Amendment as proposed, largely because of the SB 1383 compliance. The rules that were enacted for that are quite complicated, and each city has to tailor its response to it. We've worked extensively with Waste Management to get that to work with the city, especially the city's unique situation with its low population waiver. To tailor and make sure that we're set up for SB 1383 compliance. As I mentioned earlier, our low population waiver does expire before the end of this current term of the agreement in 2028. So we couldn't just wait until this agreement ended and then rebid with the SB 1383 package for waste services. So that's partly why we're doing this, and that's the 2038 was an ask from Waste Management kind of in exchange for all the additional services. So it's part of the negotiation, but staff is satisfied that we're going to be in a good position to be compliant with SB 1383, which I should say is important because CalRecycle is it's like their main priority to get that implemented. The city already has completed it, I believe, but we had a corrective action plan for the pieces of SB 1383 that we do need to comply with now, and we've done what we need to do under that corrective action plan. But point being that Cal Recycle is paying attention, and every city in the state has to comply with this, but they certainly are monitoring everyone very closely to make sure that they get everything into place. So it's, from staff's view, it's very important to have that SB 1383 compliance worked into our agreement.
So that's something I'm unclear about, which is related to Claudia's question. Why do we need to do this now when we have 4 more years in the current contract?
Because there's certain things under SB 1383 that we have to comply with now, and they weren't reflected in the current contract.
Like 1383, right?
Parts of it, yes.
Yeah.
But we had already course correction. We are not in compliance with those actions that we took?
So there are there are a lot of parts to SB 1383. The corrective action plan covered mostly education and outreach and implementation of the food recovery aspect, edible food recovery aspect of SB 1383. When we talked to Cal Recycle about that, we explained to them that we were in active negotiations with Waste Management to implement other aspects of SB 1383 that were going to go through our contract with Waste Management. And so we did not have to include that in our cap. There are pieces that are covered by I apologize if I'm not being specific enough, but I don't want to, I'm trying to do this high level so it makes sense. There are pieces that are covered in our low population waiver, such as for example, there's a requirement that we have to minimize contamination of containers, essentially people putting things in the wrong containers. That's a requirement that we don't have to comply with right now because of our low population waiver, but come 2027, before this contract expires, we will have to comply with that. And so that's baked into this amendment already, so we won't have to start over when that low population waiver comes through. And then there's other pieces. For example, there's a section on requirements for waste haulers, and in that section of SB 1383, it requires that cities, as a condition of a contract or approval to haul waste, a franchise agreement, have a condition in that contract that requires compliance with SB 1383. Our current contract does not have that language in it. And that's not something that's covered by our waiver. So we needed to amend the contract to even have something as basic as that.
Okay, that I understand. Did we do an analysis of what the consequence or the cost of consequence if we were out of compliance versus taking a 5 to 7% rate increase now for an addition, it's going to be 13 or 14 years? Did we do a compare just to make sure this was economically in our best interest?
Well, the cost of not complying with SB 1383, we're talking penalties to the city. And those can be very steep. I mean, they're by the day, and each, ongoing violations can be a new violation every single day. So no, we didn't do a cost comparison, but we, do not recommend moving forward in a way that would potentially make the city out of compliance.
I was going to say, I don't know specifically, but I know in past lives that the fines are like $10,000 per day per violation. So they might find us in violation of 3 different, it may not be that much, and a lot of times they'll work with you if you have problems, but if you're defiant about it, that's when the hammer comes. And as is typical with a lot of things, the government giveth and the government taketh away. And so I'm sure there's probably consequences, like we wouldn't be eligible for certain grants or other state funding because we were out of compliance with that. So, the cost of compliance is always less expensive than non-compliance. And for purposes of clarification, yes, this increase affects our residents, but we get, the city doesn't pay our waste. That's part of the agreement we have with them, is we get our trash, the city's trash is part of the contract. We don't pay additional for that. Plus, they do the waste pickup days, and we also collect the $111,000, I believe, is the franchise fee that we get from them. So there's plenty of return.
There's return to the city, just so we understand what we're signing up for. There is a provision, G, in the amendment, that there is an annual cap, but it really is an annual opportunity to increase the rates 5% year over year. Is that correct?
The cap only applies to the services component, which is essentially the increase to reflect CPI. The 5% cap does not apply to the diversion and disposal component of the rate, which again, they're weighted and blended together because the diversion and disposal component is capturing actual tipping fees for what it costs Waste Management to go dump the waste at the landfill or at a processing facility. Other contracts, like waste services contracts, just make the tipping fees a pass-through expense entirely, and so that would mean like the entire any increase in tipping fees goes all the way through. This is a little bit more beneficial in the sense that they're mixing it with the CPI, and so each year we're not seeing the full increase for that tipping fee, but it's helping them keep up with it. Did that make sense? I feel like I'm talking in circles a little bit.
There's math in there.
There is a lot of math in there. And I'm trying to speak in plain terms so we don't have to go through the equation. But
is there a rate increase table that comes with this agreement?
Yeah, there's exhibits. If you go, let me see which page it is on the agenda. That's probably the most helpful.
Yep.
It is, okay, so the 118 shows you, breaks out what the current rates are for 2023,
Okay, yeah, I saw that
2024.
table. I didn't understand it because it was flat every year, right? Or it didn't tell us what year over year rates were. It just listed a 3.5% for every line item. I didn't understand what this was saying.
So this is showing, it's a little, this is a little confusing because this is this year's rate increase. It's showing it split out into two. So the calculation of the rate change that we're going to see in 2024 is provided as an example to show the math for how the rate adjustment will happen each year, and that's starting on page 129 of the agenda. So that has the sample annual rate adjustment, and they're using numbers that back up this year's annual rate adjustment. So that walks through all the steps that are described in the Amendment 4. But essentially, you take the average, you look at like the prior 2 years, and you take the difference between the two, how much has CPI increased over the prior year and the current year, as they're defined, and then you average that, and that's the CPI. And then you do that also for the diversion and disposal component, which is comprised of the tipping fee, changes in tipping fees for the landfill, for the recycling processing, and for organic processing. It is a lot of math. I went over it extensively. But those two, when you get to step 3, you can see that, which is on the bottom of page 130, you can see the service component is weighted 60%, and then the diversion and disposal component is weighted 40%. So you can see that the percent change for diversion and disposal is much higher than the total percentage change that's actually going to be the annual rate adjustment. Because there were big changes with the tipping fees this last year at the county facilities.
This is still an example, correct?
This is an example.
And then in that example, you have really a 7% increase.
That is, well, maybe
on page 130.
Help, but I believe that these numbers are what is going to support the 2024 increase.
But we don't know what happens in years beyond 2024.
The same formula will be used, but we will not have the CPI number inputs or the tipping fee inputs until those years occur. So this sets out a formula for it.
But we're essentially signing an open-ended contract.
I mean,
And it's not completely open-ended, but there are some open-ended parts to it.
Yes, we're agreeing to this formula to calculate an annual rate increase for the rest of the contract. That's correct.
Somebody wants to clarify something.
Yeah, wait a minute, we'll finish up
Yeah.
with the council first.
Yeah.
Just a second, please.
Yeah.
And then just to go back one, the prior table that we were talking about, the bolded columns show you like the dollar amounts for the rate increase for this September and this November if the 2024 rate increase is effective. And the reason why it says 3.5, 3.4% is because they've split the total into 2 installments. Yeah. Did that totally answer your question? Or is there a piece
think
I
I
missed?
have a better gist than I did when we started.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead, please.
With regards to SB 1383, who is going to handle the compliance of that on our behalf?
So Roger is the staff person that handles that compliance. However, under SB 1383, we can delegate different pieces of SB 1383 compliance to direct service providers like waste management. And so through this contract, we're saying waste management, we would like you to do X, Y, and Z, include like collecting certain information for us and giving us different information so we can compile that into our annual reports that we're required to do under SB 1383. So waste management's going to help us with that compliance with this if this amendment is approved.
And in the contract, do they also participate in any fines by virtue of
Yes,
compliance, non-compliance?
So there is an indemnification provision, which is section 11 on page 115. And essentially they are agreeing to indemnify and hold the city harmless for any fines or penalties imposed by Cal Recycle due to the collector's failure to timely provide information that we need to report to Cal Recycle. If they transport organic waste to a facility, that if they don't transport waste to an organic waste facility that recovers that waste consistent with what's required under state law, or if they otherwise fail to provide the services herein. So yes, if they mess up and they don't
On them.
yeah, they have to indemnify us for that. Now, if, for example, if we failed to tell them that we don't have a low population waiver anymore, and there's certain changes that are going to happen to their process. We have it covered in the agreement, but they're going to have to change their operations if our low population waiver goes away. And if we fail to tell them that, and then we get a fine because we aren't disposing of our waste correctly, that's something that would be on the city because we have to tell them if we don't have a low population.
What's that threshold for low population?
I don't
Threshold.
remember off the top of my head. We're not so close on the population. I think it's like 7,000 or something, so we've got a little wiggle room there. Don't quote me on that number
And
exactly.
this is
but-
only for the city limits,
That's
correct?
Mhm.
And if I understand it correctly, the CPI increase that you've negotiated is capped at 5%, but rolls over to the extent that it is over 5% for any future years that are below 5%.
Right.
So whatever we may gain today, we would be spending in the future at a lower CPI rate, if I understand it properly.
Right, they can roll it over, but that rolled over CPI rate increase is going to be tied to the year it was rolled over from, if that makes sense. They don't get to, let me put it this way, if the rate is at X in year one and there's a 6% CPI increase, in year two, let's say there's a 3% CPI increase. They get to roll over 1% from year one, right? But it's gonna be the CPI in year one times the rate in year one is the added dollar value to the rate. They don't get to multiply that 1% by the now higher rate in year two. Is that?
Yeah.
So I know it's a lot of math, but we're basically they don't get the benefit of the higher rate in the future for the rolled over percentage, maybe is a simpler way to say it.
Okay. And I think one more question is that what was the motivation for a term of 14 years?
Well, I think it's good in the sense that we're going to have time to get SB 1383 all implemented and consistency with reporting with the program. And I mean, it's also just Waste Management asked for that and in exchange for us getting all of the SB 1383 services that we needed to be in compliance.
And I'm at a loss here with a little bit of the hierarchy of the corporation, and maybe the individuals here can share that with us as to how Valley Garbage comes into it, and waste, HHH, and then Waste Management. Having some sort of, it seems like there's so many corporation levels.
Yeah.
Who's our provider and our vendor?
I think I'll leave that to the applicant to answer.
Thank
but
you.
Yes.
Any other questions from the council? In that case, let's go to public comment. I presume you're Mr. Ryan Smith? Did I get you right? Oh, that's the gentleman who had put the paper in to talk.
Do we want to let the Waste Management speak first?
I'm okay if you guys would like to go a different order, like that happen.
It's up to you, Mayor, but
Yeah, go ahead. Let's listen to this gentleman. What have you got to say, sir? And then we'll go from there.
Honorable Mayor, member of the councils, good evening. For full disclosure and clarification, I'm not an employee of Waste Management. I have no financial interest in them whatsoever. I am a resident of the Valley here, and I do a lot of work with different nonprofits in our community, even down to the granular level, is just volunteering for events and helping organize and set them up. And in that, I've had the opportunity to work with Waste Management through their generous donations to some of those events and in-kind donations. And so through that, I've developed a professional relationship with some of the folks that you see here behind me. So I am here to speak on their behalf. Something that's important for me as a citizen, as a resident, that whether we have large corporations working in our valley or our local mom and pops are those people committed to our community. And for the last several years, we've experienced that with Waste Management. And I think that that's important to bring up and an important aspect to look at. Even in areas where they no longer provide service and there's a new service provider, they have still maintained their presence and still supported a lot of the events in the valley. So to me, I think that's important, and I understand it's important for the city or the county to get, for lack of a better term, the best bang for their buck, make sure that everything is in the best interest of the citizens. And I think that that's one component that we really need to look at, as the social aspect of that as well. So I speak on behalf of them tonight as someone who's been involved in these organizations and benefited from them. They're an excellent group of people to work with, and it would be my recommendation as a citizen of this valley that the council take a look at that and recommend the extension. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sir, you've been dying to come up and talk. It's your turn. Help us.
Would love to do that. My name is Josh Mann. I'm the Area Compliance and Regulatory Manager for WM, and love to answer a few of the questions that have been raised here this evening. I do keep my handy-dandy copy of SB 1383. I sleep with it under my pillow. So the correct answer is 7,500 residents for your population on that low population waiver. Another question that came up was about the structure. So WM, the WM we know today, obviously the largest provider in North America. We're made up of a lot of individual companies that were acquired over a period of many, many years. So in terms of Valley Garbage and Rubbish Company, that was an acquisition of WM many, many years ago. It was doing business as a DBA, an alternative name in which they operated under of Health Sanitation Service. So that is our corporate name. It's one that we use for contractual purposes. But in terms of the name we all know, we are WM. So that is your provider. in the hierarchy of things, Valley Garbage and Rubbish Company is a wholly owned affiliate of Waste Management, Inc. So that answers those questions. On to the questions, I think in the focus, a couple of things that came up. One was about the rate adjustment mechanism and why there is a need for change. So the current rate adjustment mechanism that exists in the agreement today is based wholly on the change in a representative consumer price index that's published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And while that has served us well in the past, we found ourselves in recent years in a hyperinflationary period, and one where, because we are using third-party facilities at the direction of the city through their agreement with the county, that we are beholden to take the material we collect here to county facilities, and as such, we bear the changes and rapidly changing cost increases of utilizing those facilities. And as a way to try and streamline the current process, which if the county decides that, like they did this year, that they're going to increase the tipping fee by well over 7%, that we would have to come to you with an extraordinary request, that in this case, we would have to provide a supplemental justification for that request, and knowing that based on where the county has said they are going with regards to Tehigas in particular in the resource center, that it was just better to build a rate adjustment methodology that accounted for these changes in tipping fees as a part of the structure of that. That way we're in agreement about what that information should look like, how it should turn into the eventual rates that we would be proposing for your approval. And at the end of the day, we're just trying to stay whole in terms of taking the material to the facilities that you've directed us to take them to. And in terms of the concern about, runaway rates, if you will, I can say that we are on a downward trend with regards to inflation. So the feds are predicting that this time next year should be around 2%. We're currently trending this year at about 3.5%, so well below that 5% that would be our cap. We would love to be in a position where our rates don't have to change, because that means our costs aren't changing. And really, that at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is just stay whole. There was another question that came up about term, and I understand that any amount of years, potentially could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, right? And in our case, we think that we've had a long, successful relationship with the city of Solvang, and one that we've been proud of, and we hope the city's been proud of. As the city manager, Randy, alluded to, that we've had a lot of success, specifically in supporting things like the tourism industry that is such an essential part, and making sure that when folks come to visit Solvang, that they have a place to put their waste, and that waste goes away, and they don't have to think about it while they're on their trip. They're not seeing any unsightly overfilled containers, and then ultimately for every event that goes on, that there is proper service on site to accommodate. So definitely looking forward to the opportunity to extend that relationship. As was alluded to by City Attorney Chelsea, that there is current time on the existing agreement, and that's certainly something that she noted as kind of trying to match things up with 1383 and potentially the high potential of the expiration of the low population waiver. And from that standpoint, we knew we were going to be running up a situation for both the city and ourselves that we didn't really want to run into, in terms of, we don't want the city to be non-compliant with 1383. That reflects obviously not great for you and not great for us, so trying to line that up. And then in terms of the extension, that's really what we see as the natural progression of this relationship. And in terms of the opportunity, I don't know if you looked around, there aren't a whole lot of other players in Santa Barbara County, and from that standpoint, there certainly aren't any other players that own landfills and own their own recycling facilities and own their own composting facilities like WM does. And so from that standpoint, I think we're offering the city the best protections against the future unknowns, i.e., right now you're really relying on the county. If those county facilities were either to close or in the case of how we're handling waste now, not qualify any longer as a high diversion facility, that we could propose alternatives that would be potentially better suited for the city's material and potentially at a rate savings. As I said, that right now we're doing what we've been directed to do in terms of taking material, but we want to preserve that relationship. It's been very, very successful, and we think at the end of the day that it really is a match of benefits for both the city and for WM in terms of delivering services for your residents and your businesses.
So you're the head of sales?
Actually, I am not. That Justin Hansinger, who's here with me, your territory manager, he's the real salesman.
You're doing a heck of a job, so. I don't have a job now.
But this is we've done this, we're getting to the end of the cycle of all of these contract updates throughout Southern California. So this is, I'm pretty well rehearsed at this point. We're 50 or 60 contracts deep, and so I apologize if it.
No, I'm kidding. I want to thank you for clarifying several of the issues that came up from the council as we were talking. That helped a lot, at least for me. Comments, questions?
Question, too.
I have a question. You'd mentioned that you're obligated to send this to the county. What other
Correct.
options are there?
Correct.
For
So,
your
yeah.
delivery options.
You pose a great question, and the options that we would be looking at potentially if the relationship between the city and the county were no longer in place, that we would probably ship it out of county for the benefit of ensuring that you always had a place to go. We know that capacity is becoming a real issue within the county and county facilities, and then also the high cost of facilities. Santa Barbara County pays some of the highest disposal charges in the state, and on one hand, it's I guess a good thing in the fact that it supports your local facilities. On the other hand, is that your residents and businesses are having to pay for it.
Mr. Clark?
This is relatively unrelated, but, and I think staff has told me this before, but, and I'm very happy with Waste Management. I support you guys.
Thank you, sir.
When residents email me that a private resident tried to get a hold of a lowboy from Marburg and they couldn't do it in Solvang, how do we explain that to the residents?
Correct. That the city has made a decision on behalf of all of their residents and businesses to ensure that services provided at a certain level of quality and certainly at a certain cost. And that is part of an exclusive agreement that the city has with WM to provide those services. And at the end of the day, that they should contact WM as the exclusive provider for the city.
And I'm fine with that, but customers are like, what do you mean? Individually, they're like, I can't buy from something, I can't purchase something from somebody that I want to because the city has a contract with somebody.
You can't get all the great things in Solvang by living outside of Solvang. I'm sorry.
Got it. I'll use that. Thank you.
Anybody else? I would like just one last couple of comments.
Yes, sir.
The gentleman from the public that spoke, you guys do a lot in donations for the city.
We try.
And
We try.
I appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, that again, it really has been a partnership. I know that this has not been easy. It's not been easy for any of the communities that WM has the pleasure of servicing. You know, that the state has some pretty bold ambitions, this one in particular about reducing our carbon footprints, our greenhouse gas emissions. And at the end of the day, that regardless of your take on whether or not the state should be doing that they've done it, and that it's our job as your provider to help you to comply with the regulations and to help your residents and businesses do their part. And we're happy to do that.
Thank you very much.
One more thing.
Another question?
Quick question, yeah. To the extent that there were delivery options that present themselves for savings, how would we modify this contract accordingly?
One of the great things about this contract is that because the rate adjustment mechanism is already in place where all we would have to do is swap out the allowed facilities to use With the substitute facilities, just pop in the rate savings. That would turn around and automatically spit out the rate savings to the ratepayer, and there's your rates.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. Do we have anybody else in the room that would like to speak? Oh, the sales guy.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Council, and staff. My name is Justin Honsinger. I'm actually the territory manager for this region. And really, the reason I wanted to come up tonight was to introduce myself. I grew up in the valley here, Visadores ride, rancher, cowboy, and veteran myself, but really to the pleasure to introduce Jessica McGinnis here, that actually is your assigned territory person that actually is going out and working with each of these customers and each of your commercial businesses, residents, anyone that has a question, it gets straight right to Jessica. And we may be a corporation, but we are a local team. Stacy Walters on this backside, over 40 years of experience with WM, lives right up the road. And so I just want it clear that yes, we may be a corporation, but we are locally ran, we're locally operated, and we take a lot of pride in that. And Tracy Beard was trying to get here this evening. As you know, we do a lot of work, as you stated earlier, in the city of Solvang, and we take a lot of pride in that. And I just want to thank you guys for taking the opportunity to review this amendment and extension this evening. And we don't take it for granted. And we appreciate your guys' time, and we appreciate that partnership, because SB 1383 changed a lot of things. And actually, you were right, it's $10,000 a day of a fine that they impose onto the municipality. And for us, we look at things as partnerships. As my counterpart Josh said, we take a lot of pride. If you guys are in that seat, we take ownership as well, because we're servicing you folks. So we think this is a valuable, mutual agreement between the city and WM to continue a great partnership and keeping both sides safe. So thank you very much for having us this evening.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Anybody else in the audience here want to say something? Okay, we have one person on Zoom that would like to speak. Can you open that up for us, Laser? No, it's not that one.
You could ask him to speak.
Oh, Padfield? Mr. Padfield?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can now, thank you.
Good.
Go ahead.
Okay. I hate to be the skunk at the garden party here, but I feel that this is putting the cart before the horse, as they say. And I see this as a potential awarding of a no-bid contract, to 2038. Why not, considering the current contract expires in 2027, and yes, I am completely aware of SB 1383 and the potential threats for fines and so on and so forth. I just feel, as a citizen and a taxpayer of this community, that we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, not a little bit, way ahead of ourselves. The 5% CPI cap and the other rate adjustments, let's be honest, that's called a rate hike in this day and age. So my feeling is, why not open this up to bidding, get some spirited bidding in with another company that happened to used to be they are in the valley, in fact, and they are a local Santa Barbara company. So yes, I realize there's a lot of feel good between the city and Waste Management, and I agree. However, I also feel that if it's opened up to a bidding process, something more fruitful might be available to the city and us citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? I don't see anybody else with their hand up on Zoom, so we'll bring it back to the council for last comments or a motion.
I have some comments. Chelsea, it's really clear you understand this contract, but you make me, I'm just mere mortal when it comes to understanding this topic, because I have no idea what it's telling me. And what the gentleman from Waste Management just explained is that this is not necessarily a cost-driven contract. It is a CPI driven contract. And the costs that are being burdened in this amendment are actually CPI driven. Costs of labor and increasing costs of everything, not necessarily tied to the cost of the increased compliance requirement. So what I worry about when we are moving into something that's completely new and as a compliance requirement is we really don't know the costs. We're anticipating the real costs just of that change. So it does bother me that we would enter into a contract of such long term when we really don't understand what costs we're passing on to the residents of the city. So I would rather take our time before we agree to this amendment tonight and understand why the term needs to be that long, if there's benefit in looking at competition, if we really understand the costs and the math behind the rate hikes, and what is the exposure. We've got a bit of a history in the city entering into agreements that we really didn't understand. I can't say I fully understand this agreement.
Anybody else? Okay, so that brings us to a motion to approve, disapprove. What can we have?
I'd like to give direction to the staff to help us dig into these costs a little bit in a more simple way than 18 pages of tables. So we could understand exactly year over year what is the impact to the residents.
Do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I guess my comment is that I think that the contract is the best that our staff could negotiate. But I also would like to see if it would be acceptable, because I agree with the speaker, Mr. Padfield, as it relates to being competitive and not having a predetermined good old boys club type arrangement. And in a debated or a open bid program might indeed be the best solution for that. But I wouldn't mind a contract that, say, went to 2030 or some such thing, and just if there was any flexibility in that regard, that would get us through and give us that database that we need for compliance, and it would give them, as the existing organization, a competitive edge as well for that bid. So,
My opinion is that this is very complicated stuff. And the reason we, as a council, hired Randy, and the reason that we put our trust into Chelsea and her firm is to navigate things like this in the city's best interest. And I put more weight on that because Waste Management has a good reputation and has been here a long, long time. And I have to trust that our staff is doing what is in the best interest of the city. So if it comes to it, I will make an motion to approve Amendment 4 to the agreement with Valley Garbage.
I think I will bring up that, yes, it is allowing for increased costs. These are based on data. It's not just an arbitrary increase. This is tied to how much it costs to drop everything off at the different landfills and recycling facilities. It is based on consumer price index. It's based on costs that may increase that are outside of the control of Waste Management. I think it's fair that it's gonna come up for review on staff. It's not just gonna get imposed on the city. And I think a contract that would be based on estimates rather than actual costs would put us in the same position as with the contract on the company that manages our transit where we sign an agreement and it does not anticipate the cost based on what the actual market is demanding, and then we have to go back to the drawing board. I think this is allowing to adjust costs based on what true costs are rather than a speculation. So I think it's fair to agree to this contract, and
So are you
those are my
seconding
thoughts.
the motion?
I am seconding the motion. Yes, that's
Okay.
a very long-winded way of saying that I second it. But I want to say why rather than just, going
Thank you.
along with it.
That was well said. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Claudia Arona.
Yes.
Councilmember Elizabeth Arona.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Yes.
Mayor Infante.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1.
Thank you. Let's move on to item 8D, please. Ms. Berry, if you'd read that into the record.
Discussion and direction to staff regarding potential zoning code amendments to implement Solvang 2045 general plan.
Staff report, please.
Yes, good evening, Council and Mayor. Before you this evening is sort of just an update of where we're at with potential zoning ordinance amendments. No ordinances before you this evening. We're just sort of checking in with the council to verify that we are going in the right direction in terms of amending the city's zoning ordinance. So as many of you do know, or if you do not know, our zoning ordinance was adopted in 1990. The image that is on the left-hand side of your screen is the good old typewriter version of the code itself. The image on the right-hand side of your screen is the produced internet version of it. If you actually read the text, it's exactly the same. Nothing wrong with that, but times have changed, and there are. So what this this tells us is that a lot of our code here in the zoning ordinance has been untouched for quite some time, and so the council just recently adopted its general plan at its last meeting. That was the first step. So this is the actual what we call implementation step. So to take a step back on that, it's just trying to give you an overview of what entitlement processing looks like for our department. So it starts with this new 2045 Solvang general plan. Again, that's now adopted, it's in place. And then everything under the Solvang general plan is used to implement it. So the first stop is going to be our Solvang municipal code, particular our Chapter 11 zoning ordinance. And then there's a subshoot off of there, which is called the Village Estate Specific Plan Number 2, which was an ordinance enacted in 1991. Now, in order to implement these items, along with the general plan, we drop down to our application types. So our code currently has conditional use permits, or CUPs. I lumped variances in the same aspect, but it's few and far between that we have variances come in. We have an application type called development plans. It's not necessarily permits, it's plans. It was adopted from the old county code. We're requesting to morph that into what's called a development permit instead that runs with the lay of the land. Subdivisions, that really has gone untouched, and rightfully so. It's a typically straightforward process. And then finally, the idea of land use permits, which is what's currently in our code today, and we're looking to morph that into what's called a proposed zoning clearance. So once an applicant receives an entitlement, again, still implementing now the entitlement, which implements the either specific plan or municipal code, and then finally the general plan, an applicant usually has to go through a building permit process, and that's it's a straightforward process. It's consistency with California Building Code. As you can see, there is one line that sort of offshoots here from the land use permits, and that could just be things such as signage or facade improvements, that colors, et cetera. Those don't need building permits, so they just go straight to project completion. You put up a new sign and/or you recolor your building. You're done. So that's why there's that offshoot. So this sort of gives you this hierarchy of that kind of again begins with the general plan. This sets the policy stage for everything else that falls down between there. So again, the framework for this for the potential amendments are the following. It's your primary goals for the 2024-26 fiscal cycle. It's to streamline the entitlement and building process. So that's where a lot of these changes are going to be born from. The second one is the general plan itself. It is a policy document. It outlays the roadmap for us to change. There are quite a bit of policies that have been newly adopted as a part of this general plan, but actually a good portion of it is, believe it or not, a carryover from the last general plan. We just never amended our code to implement it. So it's our time to actually reflect and look at their code and begin the implementation process for a general plan that this community worked so hard for over the last 4 years. The Planning Commission has provided direction to city staff on some of the proposed amendments in both May and June. We held sort of mini workshops with them to go over some of the items that I'm going to go over with you today at a much more higher level. And then this last Thursday, the DRC gave us some direction on some of the objective standards that were contained in one of the last chapters of your packet, and that's Chapter 19, Overlay Zones, and I'll get into that in a minute. So some of the bigger changes is the proposed zoning map. So that we actually have two different maps. We have the general plan land use, which again is it's a broader map. It's a more broad brush, 50,000 foot level. The zoning map brings it back down a little bit now, down to 20,000 foot level. So the zoning map is the nuts and bolts essentially. We are proposing as a consolidation of similar zones into broader residential categories. Believe it or not, for a town of our size, we have about 18 residential categories. That's a lot. And that's basically set because a lot of these categories were based on lot size, but little things here and there are exactly the same. So why not just do the smart thing and kind of let lot size kind of dictate its thing and consolidate them? So that's the genesis behind that. The general plan did eliminate agriculture as a land use, so we need to in turn be consistent and eliminate the ag zone. We're going to replace that with an ag tourist zone and also replace it with an open space zone as well. And then finally rename various zoning districts to better align with their actual uses or functions. Again, that's more of a cosmetic, but again, it's a signification that we are moving forward that with these zones that better align with what they're actually used for. So the map on the next screen is the proposed zoning amendments or zoning map. There is a rather substantial color differential. Our current zoning map has blue for residential and some other wild colors on there that aren't industry standard. You talk to any real estate professional or land developer, when they look at a zoning map, they're looking for specific colors. They're looking for yellow and oranges. Oranges typically mean higher densities. Yellow means lower densities. So we're kind of standardizing our map with sort of this industry standard. The map colors are basically the same what you saw with the general plan, except for there are a couple of differentials. Again, general plan is a larger portion vision. A great example is the low-medium density category. Right now, there are two zoning districts that correspond to it, 20R1 and DR 1.8. Those would be condensed to R1. However, the medium density, there's actually two zoning categories that would be consistent with the medium density zone. So again, zoning just does a deeper drill. It doesn't have to be a 100% match one for one. And it's already built into your general plan as such, because it has, again, a broad brush of descriptions and densities. It's your zoning that basically controls densities. So if you want a residential zone to have a 1 acre lot, then you can zone it for a minimum lot size of 1 acre. But your density zone in the general plan is 1 to 3 acres. So then you split it off the other one to be 1.5 acres to 3 acres, et cetera. So that's why you can have multiple zones under one general plan land use designation. So just to give a little bit more clarification on that. Along with the map amendments, we are proposing a large series of text amendments. The first one is creating clear implementation language, including what is to occur for determinations. Those are determinations within our department. An appeals process that's clearly labeled and outlined. Processing that established time limits for processing. So that's, again, really trying to look into our code that was built in the late 80s and early 90s with this idea of no real set standards or metrics. We're going to try to build those in the code itself. We're going to update our zoning's definitions, and that's Chapter 3 for consistency with proposed land uses. Update definitions based on state statutes, and elimination of uses no longer used or appropriate across all zones. And we made that presentation earlier on. And again, there's a wide range of uses that are allowed in the TRC that really aren't appropriate anymore. And so we're taking a hard look at those definitions, and we've gotten some direction from the Planning Commission to further amend some of those definitions. The other one is provide allowable uses and development standards in a clear and concise manner. So a great example is just this morning alone, We had a call from a resident who's looking to open up a business here in town. My assistant planner had to look 4 different places to figure out all the standards for that person in order to give them all the correct information on where they could open up a physical therapy location here in town. Oh, hey, and by the way, the location that they were looking at opening up, which is a very logical location, doesn't allow for a physical therapy office. It's really weird, even though it's right next to offices that allow for physical therapy. So it's looking at these little intricacies of if we're establishing a neighborhood commercial node, looking at the way our economy has moved forward since the early 90s, you know, services such as medical offices, typically those are allowed uses in those type of zones. So that's the whole point of the definitions, is to look and then translate that into development standards. The other big portion of the text amendments, including revising our parking section to make clear distinctions of where parking can be located. We did have an incident last week that sort of solidified why we're trying to move forward with our parking standards. A resident received a letter in the mail in regards to cars that were not registered and potential violations of our code. And then we did a little deep dive on the counter just to verify and give her the right direction on how to clean up the code issues that are ongoing, and she was working with her tenants. Well, one thing we did note in our municipal code is, in a single-family residence, you are only permitted to park in your garage. I don't know why. So I'm going to assume that there's a lot of violators of said regulations, not parking in your garage, but it's very specific. You're not allowed to park within the front setback. Most municipalities allow for parking in the front setback, particularly if it's in a paved area or in a driveway, as long as the car doesn't overhang on a sidewalk or in the right-of-way. Ours, for whatever reason, does not. And then looking back further, I can see that it hasn't been amended since 1990. So again, trying to make sort of real-world changes of what's on the ground today versus what was done in the past. Another one I did want to point out was a language change in regards to changes in use. This is particularly going to affect our village. And so right now, when a business wants to open up in town and they find an empty storefront here in the village, they're ready to go, they're ready to pour money into, say, turning a space from an office space into a restaurant space, and that's a lot of money. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars usually to make those conversions happen. But we've had instances where they have not happened, simply because their one linchpin and one linchpin only is parking. And these are buildings that obviously were built a long time ago that met a certain parking threshold at the time that they were constructed, at the time they were entitled. But here we are, we're kind of handicapping ourselves. So we have to ask ourselves, do we want an empty storefront, or do we want to build a code that allows for the flexibility in the changes of allowed uses in that zone to change over time and not necessarily continue to look at parking? So we are proposing a language change that would not require any additional parking for a change in use for an allowed use within the village. So again, we're looking at changes of allowed office or retail to convert to a restaurant, or let's just say, 10, 15 years down the road, retail becomes really big again. So guess what? They can morph back from a restaurant services back to a retail use and not be penalized for whatever parking standards are invented 10, 15 years down the road. It's really trying to build in this idea of flexibility in our code to breathe in, breathe out as trends come in to play. So again, that there is an exception, and that's hotel and lodging units, because we do want to park those. Those are for sure things that we want to park in, as well as new construction that goes there. You have to park those. And then proposed residential uses, you got to park those as well. So there are some built-in things that you have to park, but again, if you're looking at an allowed use, we want to have that flexibility in our village to not necessarily hamstring the free market economy into trying to figure out what can go in and what can't, what's successful and what's not. We are looking at also amending supplemental regulations for consistency with new definitions of state law. We have a dedicated chapter to that. And so again, those include updating our density bonus. Our density bonus hasn't been updated for easily 15 years. The state has really updated that over the last 5 years. So just trying to be in tune with that, updating our ADU ordinance, and then also green lighting for new uses. A great example is what's called a live-work unit. That is an opportunity for potential residences in an office commercial, where you have a commercial use that's on the ground level or horizontal on the front, and then an actual living unit that's connected, but from a building code standpoint, they're not connected. So, but the actual owner owns two pieces of property. He owns both the commercial aspect and the residential aspect, and they live in the residential and work down into the commercial. It works really well for small offices or other sort of entrepreneurial spirit, including, you know, folks that are engineers or architects that run a one-person shop. Those are very valuable spaces, which our code right now is completely silent on. It's a trend that's been available to other cities for quite some time, and just bringing those type of ideas to the city of Solvang. So again, here's an example of what we're looking at in the new code is sort of providing these tables. And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes development standards can be in 3 or 4 places in the code. Really just trying to condense it down into one location so that someone from the planning counter or the building counter can easily hand these out. We can always refer residents to these 2 sections. We can create handouts. It makes it really easy to implement our code. It's really coming to this mantra of, hey, we're lean and we want to be mean, and we want to be able to get through this as quickly as we can by providing as much information in one location. So that's just a flavor and example of how we're trying to morph our code from its existing space into something a little bit more modern. The last one has really just had a genesis over the last few weeks, or actually last couple months, and we've been working really hard. It actually was born from the GPAC, which worked on the general plan update and formulating what's called these design districts. We are sort of trying to write in what's called an overlay district. An overlay zone creates additional regulations for a specific area to address specific needs or objectives. So typically these overlay zones are done for historic areas, open space areas, or sometimes to promote a specific type of development. Like other zoning regs, the overlay zones can control building and design, permitted land uses, densities, and other factors, and it acts as sort of this additional layer on top of the regular underlying zoning district. So we actually do have one overlay zone already codified. We just never showed it in our maps. We're going to show it today. We're going to show it in our new maps, which is the SP2, again, adopted in 1991, that specific plan. But we are actually proposing 2 design district overlays for consistency with the new community design element. And that's going to be known as the Village Area, or Design District 1, and then the Mission Design District 2. So the purpose is to codify what's called objective standards that all new development will need to follow. So these are minimum standards that we are sort of saying this is the type of development we want to see from in terms of a building form and factor. And then from there, you can then go to review from to the DRC and other review authority bodies. However, it gives city staff and it gives a developer a clear sort of pathway of set the expectations of what we're looking for. It allows city staff to quickly be able to not necessarily reject an application, but go through an application and pinpoint exactly what needs to get done before it even gets to a review authority. And again, it proposes these standards that assist us and the applicant to set these minimum design expectations regardless of use. And these are what's called an objective form. So that means we're able to quantify them because we include measurements for windows, we include measurements for the width of half timbers, et cetera. So we have 2 proposed design districts. The first one is the DD1. Obviously, it'll be the vernacular of the Old World Danish / Tudor design, and that's shown in the yellow. And then the second design district is in green, and that's consistent with the general plan, which states it wants a more mission aesthetic there and a mission design. So again, we're looking at the clay tiles, we're looking at arcades and other sort of type of forms and features that are more connected to the Spanish Revival architecture type that the GPAC had worked so hard to sort of emulate through their policy and put these in for a pedal to the metal in an objective standard that covers both commercial and residential. So that's the other key too, because this helps us basically do one of the bigger items, which is allow for mixed-use developments to occur in these 2 core districts. So again, the proposed overlay zones have standards for architectural materials, building and mass height, roofing, windows, ornamental details, landscape, lighting, site planning, and pedestrian amenities. And again, it's really meant to be the first cut because it's one of these, this is now, we have a couple, there aren't proposed projects, but they are potential that the applicants have reached out to city staff, particularly a couple all residential projects in the design district overlay 1. And without objective standards, it really hamstrings us to the type of control that we have in the form and design. This would allow us to bring back the local control we so desperately need, particularly when it comes to residential projects in these design districts and or commercial projects that are potentially on the horizon within the next 6 to 9 months. So we do have a proposed schedule. Like I said, we've been working with the Planning Commission since May. We worked with the DRC last Thursday. We had a very spirited discussion because this is a very new topic. We were asked to return to the DRC with additional comments and edits. We're looking to do that August 15th. And then we're looking to go to the Planning Commission in September and then back to y'all at the end of September, early October to finalize that. And the new code would be set in place in 30 days afterwards. So basically, once the new code is in place, any new applications that we receive need to go to the new code. Applications that are in flux, typically we can give option of whether to process under the new code or the old code. But right now, we currently have a lull in those new applications. So hence why we've been able to focus on this design overlay districts and this code amendment before you this or the potential code amendment before you this evening. So I know it's a very high-level overview. You've already dealt with one project, one item that was already high-level overview, but this is of the same manner. So I'm going to open up to questions from the council.
Questions?
I do have one question. Are formula restaurants still not allowed?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that's unique to Solvang is very much carrying over. So we've heard formula restaurants, outdoor barbecues, those things are carrying over, but again, in a much more succinct manner and very clear manner through the table, because in this instance, the table is very clear. Formula restaurants, you see blank, that means it's not even allowed. It's a non-starter.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rono, what kind of restaurants did you say?
Formula restaurants.
Raphael, with regards to how would you respond to a CUP type project, or is that of the same nature process that we have now, or would there be something different for that?
It'll be the same. There's one fundamental change is currently right now our CUP projects, for one, there's just a huge, large list of potential CUPs that may not necessarily jive with the appropriateness of the district. A great example is a hospital. You can go get a CUP for a hospital in a residential zone. Now, I don't think that's rather appropriate for a residential zone. So we're eliminating that completely, the ability to do that. So that would be one change. The other is our CUP text right now requires a litany of items that are required for applications. It's proposed to be amended so that the requirement for applications are done by the planning manager, and it's listed in a checklist that is provided by the planning manager. Now, that checklist already exists today. We've already modified it back in spring to take out some of the things that we can no longer do through state law. So in that aspect, you can go to the checklist today, and it essentially is exactly what you need to provide for us today and in the future. So again, just trying to streamline that aspect and then make it very clear who the review authority is on a conditional use permit. So right now, sometimes it's always the planning commission, but then it waffles here and there about sometimes it's the council, et cetera. We just make it completely clear. It's the commission, and if it needs to get appealed, it goes to the council.
Okay. And then what about, there's a lot of grandfathered items within the city, whether it be open seating or what have you, but how is that process going to be resolved?
Non-conforming uses don't change. They continue to function as they are. So that I mean, a code, when a code changes, if it was an allowed use at the time and then it becomes a not allowed use, it becomes then an existing non-conforming use. And we have actually language in our code today that deals with existing non-conforming uses and how those can expand. That text is not going to change. However, it eventually will need to change based on future direction from this council.
Because, yeah, it should not be perpetuated. Just because you call it a grandfather doesn't mean it needs to, if there's a tenant change or if there's a modification of some kind.
And now is the time to make those modifications. So a great example is if you have in our non-conforming use section that currently it's kind of silent on when a non-conforming business goes out of business, what's that time frame for it to just extinguish? Because you have to give a time frame. Some cities do 30 days, some do 90 days, some do 180, or even a year. We're completely silent. So if that's something you want in this code today, I'll be happy to put that in the code today. Simply because that's a good practice to have. It's just, unfortunately, I'm a small staff. I have one other planner, and it's a lot of work. So if that's something that you wish to see in this code update, I most certainly can make it happen.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Is there anywhere in code that a business in the TRC needs to have its business name on the building or in front of the doors? I'm referring to, I drove by those Israeli skin cream places, and there's no lettering on the building. It's just a door with a couple people barking at people walking down the street.
There's a requirement for addresses, but there is no requirement currently to have a business name on the door.
Isn't that weird?
You can make it a requirement, but it's
I would
hard to
like to
enforce.
make that a requirement, but you need to have a business name on your business.
I think in those businesses in particular, simply because there's focusing on the use versus the business name is the better way to do it, and we kind of addressed it in this code update that hopefully goes back to you because there's actually a specific category. It's called personal services restricted.
Yeah.
So again, we try to be a little bit broad and really drill into what that is, and we're actually there's a couple uses that we felt that aren't appropriate in the TRC, and that not necessarily that type of use, but the way their methodologies are potentially used is one way we can target.
There's a can of worms.
It is, but again, trying to just not necessarily be outright of what we don't want in some instances, but being able to be specific but not specific at the same time, if you kind of get where I'm going with this.
I get you. It's weird to have a business with no business name.
And again, most certainly we can do that. That we'd have to look at where to treat that, particularly in the sign ordinance, but that's a whole another work effort that will come after this.
And I have to say, I love the fact that that we are trying to streamline the entitlement and building process to make it easier for residents and business to improve their properties. I love that.
And again, the intention is the land use permit, if you look in our code today, it's very cumbersome. It requires an application. It requires a planning manager to make a determination of what forms you need and what plans you need. The reality is if it's an allowed use and we call it a P as in permitted, then we, through the city council, have said we want these uses here. So we should make that as easy as possible to get. A zoning clearance is really just meant to be a piece of paper that we sign off to make sure A, you're doing exactly what you say you're going to do. B, it meets all the criteria of the zoning ordinance. And C, it just needs my John Hancock or my assistant planner, John Hancock, to give it a go. That's what's planning to replace the land use permit, is that sort of zoning clearance. And we capture that in one fellow swoop, particularly if someone wants to open up a business certificate. We capture it right then and there at one counter. And again, this is the idea of red carpet, not red tape. And I want you to be able to be a one-stop shop. And then I want to be able to, our staff to be able to say, what do you need from us to continue to further develop your business here in town? And what can we do for you?
I would love that to be here too. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I have a question, Raphael. In the 2 design districts, did we change the borders at all?
No, the borders have not changed. There's the one infill area, which comprises of the the high density residential that this council concurred with the Planning Commission, that is the same. So the borders are exactly the same from the general plan. Again, that's the implementation of the general plan, which is, again, why we're really looking to do these objective standards right here and now, with the understanding that there will be changes that need to be made, but something is better than nothing at this point, particularly when we have a few potential projects that are waiting to move forward that are all residential in that district, and we clearly have a mandate of what type of development we'd like to see in a building form in that area.
So you did say that the design governance would apply for new development, but does it apply as well for existing?
So there are carve-outs that we asked the DRC to provide some comments on, to which they I think this was such a large item for them to wrap their heads around. But there are carve-outs we've made right now that are sitting in draft form. One of the ones is it doesn't apply to existing single-family residences or additions that are there. It doesn't apply for additions that are over 500 square feet. 500 square feet tends to be this magical number in the building code. Again, trying to tie a rhyme and reason versus just a number that comes out of thin air. Typically at 500 square feet, you're required to do additional studies like geotechnical studies, additional structural studies. So that's that magical number. And then the last one is it's connected to school fees. Believe it or not, when you have a residential addition and or commercial addition that's under 500 square feet, you don't pay school fees. So again, that just ties into ultimately how the way we do business and the way in terms of how we can expedite permit processing all in one by setting the stage for that. So if there are exceptions that you're looking to have, now would be that time to get that feedback. And again, we don't want to be too onerous on the existing buildings, because you don't want an existing building that isn't of sort of this old world Danish Tudor form that does have it doesn't have expansion of 1,000 square feet. Do we want that to then morph into everything to be exactly the same, or do we want to allow for a little bit of deviation? So again, the 500 is the good, at least from my practice, it's a good square number to run off of.
I just add, there's some good comments going on in this exchange. I do agree we should have some position on whether businesses have signage or a business name that's visible. Mainly because when our visitors who come and go let us know that sound business practice is not being followed and they have a complaint, which company are they actually referring to? We need some visible signage around that. And the second thing that I thought was a good comment is we should explore how do we reconcile, right? Someone who's non-compliant or being grandfathered in. We need a window of time that says, just remaining silent is a missed opportunity.
And I agree. And again, that's the point of coming to you all to this, to have those discussions, because one of the things that I've noticed in our existing code is we don't actually have an entitlement time frame. So we can have entitlements that literally run for 10, 15 years, as long as they keep extending it, and it goes and the bodies approve it. Most cities have a 5-year time limit, and there's always an exception for extraneous circumstances, such as, i.e., they need federal permitting or state permitting, something to that effect that we kind of already know there's a roadblock, so we want to give them a little bit more time. But 5 years is generally the accepted practice, and none of that's built in our code. As far as the business name goes, most certainly we can try to craft something. I'm going to have to run that by the city attorney to make sure we fall in line. But one of the bigger things about this is really there are reasons why some of our businesses don't have signs, and it's mainly because our rules for signage are just hard. They're really hard for a business. And so again, that's part, I think that's part of a larger signage discussion versus here in the code. But most certainly, again, if you want something, I will try to get it in.
If I could add, let's bring that up. That would be a design review, maybe?
Yeah, so we're going to have another
Yeah, I would like to have that put on their agenda to address that. Or how do we...
You're suggesting that we wait to bring it when we do the sign amendments, right?
Correct,
Which is
yeah.
a separate
Okay.
ordinance.
I would like that to be
come
added.
later. Okay.
Yeah, and again, that would like to end this work effort first
Yeah,
before we
I got
tackle the next
I don't need to sidetrack.
sign effort, because that involves a lot more buy-in, particularly with our Chamber of Commerce and our existing businesses. We have a sign survey that's already out. We've only had a few respondents, but myself and Jennifer, our code compliance, we're going to actually walk on Friday around the village and then pass out flyers to get more business input on what they want to do with signs. So we've already started that effort, but we're kind of, it's in its infancy at this point, and that takes a lot more involvement from our businesses because we need buy-in from them.
And signs are a big deal with some merchants.
They are very much a big deal, and I hear you loud and clear. I hear them loud and clear.
Yeah,
I
and
can
they
only
are
do
very loud and clear. Or maybe not so clear, but very loud. Okay, got it.
Couple of questions for you. Your title, your slide entitled "An Engagement Process" circled around and it said, okay, so we'll choose design and colors and boom, it goes. That it avoided the DRC. Am I hearing that you're going to put color and design standards in the codes?
So we had feedback from the DRC. The DRC wishes to continue to review the building standards. So the point of objective standards is when I have an objective standard, that means I've met the requirements that are outlined to me. And so what's kind of left at that point? And so typically most cities, when they have objective standards, if you've met the standards, off you go.
Right.
The DRC felt that at this juncture wasn't appropriate, so we're going to edit that back in to allow for the building review. But what we are looking for from a DRC standpoint as well, as a part of the sort of, again, more work effort on our end, I love creating more work for myself, is putting together a handbook that provides more graphics after this is passed, but also a color palette, because that's one of our chief complaints that we get from applicants is when they come to the counter and they want to repaint their building and they ask me, what color do I want to see? I give them the blank stare because it's not what I want, but it's more of what the DRC is looking for. And so I think working in tandem with the DRC to come up with a plug-and-play palette that then says, hey, if you use this type of wall coloring with these type of trim colors, we're okay with that. Off you go. But if they want to go all dark and all black and go from there, you can do that too. You just need to go to the DRC for approval and let the DRC figure it out. And that's why we built in sort of this alternative compliance. So again, that's why these are in draft form to come back and get these comments. The DRC made those comments very clear on Thursday. We've already started editing some things based on those DRC comments and bringing back building form. The one thing that will not go back to DRC though, as a part of this, is residential. And simply because residential, it's very clear in state law that unless they're objective, you can't go there.
Okay.
And so we're making the objective standard.
Residential has never been a big issue when I've been a part of any of these, so I understand. That's fine. You were talking about parking. Do you have anything that addresses parking in lieu?
We do not, because again, that's another issue that's on hand that needs a good study. I understand that the in lieu fee right now is about little less than $13,000 and change. Call that for what you will.
I don't think it's that high, is it?
It is. It is.
13,000. How about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
But with that being said, $13,000 doesn't go a long ways nowadays, considering a Big Mac meal costs you $20, so I've heard. So with that being said, we are looking at, I know I've spoken with Randy ad nauseum as well as Roger, our counterpart, of looking at bringing that item back sometime in the next fiscal year to discuss, the in lieu fee. And then at that time, it's the appropriate time to really adjust the in lieu fee language.
Okay.
As I say, we're actually in the process of doing retaining a consultant to do a fee study. We've talked about that a lot. To look at the fees we currently charge, is it sufficient? I know our current parking in lieu is around $13,000. I heard Santa Barbara's was closer to $40,000
It's really
per space. And I'm not saying ours should be that high, but it should be higher than it is. Other fees that we don't collect at all. We don't do anything for schools, or not schools, but parks and rec. We don't have an IT fee. Obviously, we got to stay up. Everything's going AI and whatnot. There should be a portion of our fees that is dedicated to keeping our IT infrastructure up to date. Those kinds of things were never considered. A lot of fees that we could collect, we don't. We haven't updated our some of our traffic mitigation fees and those kinds of things haven't been updated in forever. So that's part of what we'll be doing, and we'll be bringing that back sometime around the time we're looking to do mid-year budget adjustments.
Funny. Hire a consultant to explore consulting fees.
Perfect.
Excellent. That's city government.
But as far as the parking goes, I mean, the one big change is the one I highlighted is basically this idea and concept, which I have actually executed in a previous stop, which was basically say, hey, we understand parking's an issue, but that council made a conscious decision. Did it want to continue to see empty storefronts because no one can meet the parking regs? Or did it just want to say, you know what, it met the parking regs at one time and that's okay. And so we want to see new businesses and we want to see non-empty storefronts, so we're going to let that go. And so again, it's a conscious decision, and it's more of a free market. It allows the free market to come and go, who can develop, who can't, et cetera.
At some point in time, I really would like staff to come up with an idea of what we could do for parking between employee parking, residential parking, all these kinds of things that cause the issues when we have a hell of a lot of tourists.
It's extremely important, so I agree.
It's big, and we'll go from there. Okay, last comments?
One more question, if I may. And I promise you, my problem is I went to public school maybe, but on the bottom of page 135, please, those last two lines, can you kind of let me know what are we trying to get here with that? You have an example of density bonus housing as a exemption. And I don't know where you're going with this thought process.
Oh, the exceptions. So, yeah. So, the line says city staff recommends that these do not that the design objectives move forward in order to ensure potential future development projects which are on the rise and do not skirt newly adopted policies with few exceptions, i.e. density bonus housing. So, density bonus housing, state law builds in what's called concessions. So the city, it's very hard for us to deny a concession when it comes to state density bonus housing. So just a really quick primer on density bonus housing. A developer can come in and ask for a density bonus. They may or may not have actually more units, but they could just ask for the bonus itself. And then from there, based on the number of units they deed restrict for lower income housing, whether it's very low, now moderate, we have to accommodate a concession, i.e. a waiver of a standard is the best way of putting it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So if we have objective standards in place, there's quite a bit of standards. There's quite a few, if they're in place, then the city can waive a certain objective standard. Whether it's waiving open space requirements because they can't get the number of units in, et cetera. So that's an applicant can request that waiver as a part of that.
Where would the exception be approved or denied? At what level?
It can only be denied if there's a preponderance of evidence that it violates a health, safety, welfare issue. So the example I give the most is height. Height's a good one. Applicant comes in, wants to do a state density bonus, and proposes a building with our height limit's 35 feet. Say they propose a building at 55 feet in order to get the density done. We may not have a ladder truck that basically allows the fire department to fight a fire at 55 feet. So therefore, that's a pretty high health safety issue because the fire department can't do their job at such a building with such a height. Does that make sense?
Well, but would the backside be, well, let me buy you a new truck and let me put on another story on this building?
Potentially. There's been times where in jurisdictions that do provide in lieu fees and other things to do that and get that done. In that instance, we have no such mechanism. But again, the preponderance of evidence is I want to veer us back, is a much higher threshold than just simply saying, I don't like it because it's too dense.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to the public. I have one public item request from Mr. Dennis Beebe.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Thank you for your continued service to our community. Dennis Beebe, Solvang. Raphael has my memo. I won't, read it, but I had time to look at both his memo and the attachments. There were 4 attachments. And I'm glad to see he intends to use the general plan as a basis for all these zoning chapters in the ordinance. But I'm a kind of a terminology guy and consistency guy, and I saw differences in his terminology from the general plan. So I've specified those to her. I saw the same discrepancies in some of the slides he showed tonight. The title of the Village Area Design District, Village Design District. I also pointed out on his proposed zoning map, I didn't see the high-density residential zone for Site B, which was approved by City Council earlier this year to comply with the housing element. So maybe it's my color vision defective eyes, but I didn't see it on his color zoning map. Parking, I spotted a reduction in the off-street parking required for multifamily residences. Why would we ever reduce the requirement for off-street parking? Do we think people are going to use less cars in the future when they rent a multifamily residence? I don't. And, excuse me, land use, it's a common term in the general plan. In fact, there's a land use diagram that kind of anchors all the zoning that you see after that. And it's called land use diagram, and there's colors and names for them. We got to use the consistent terminology of land use in any zoning ordinances that follow. It's just a consistency and a less confusing thing. And one more thing, this chart in the memo lists a land use called tourist commercial. The general plan doesn't call it that. It's a tourist-related commercial. It's just a consistency thing, and it causes less confusion. The TRC has a different term in the general plan than it does in the proposed zoning map. Little things, but there's a great deal of detail in this packet. I didn't get through it all, and I don't know how much publicity it's getting. I sure would wish there were a way that these proposed zoning changes, I agree with the consolidation and simplicity and clarity stuff, I mean the goals, but there's a lot of requirements here, and there's, lots of people that ought to be informed of it. Try for a different publicity. Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. Anybody else want to speak on this subject? I don't see anybody with their hands up on Zoom, so we'll bring it back to the council. This was strictly a review. There's no approval necessary at this point, I believe.
We are looking for direction to staff.
Go forward and be fruitful.
Well, I just want to clarify. So the direction I did here is putting in timeframes for non-conforming uses. So I'll work with Chelsea for sure on that one. And then I will look into our code and explore the building business names and see what we can do from that aspect. To specifically respond to Dennis's concerns, again, as I showed in the graphic earlier, the general plan, it's the larger arching, but the zoning ordinance has its own definitions. It has its own nomenclature. It is fundamentally different from the general plan, which is why you do have different names for different things. That's why there's a chart in the general plan that will show what the corresponding zone is, and that unfortunately we have to amend our general plan, FYI, but that's okay. And so and then as for to address the zoning map issue, yes, he is correct. The map that was in your packet is the older map. The newer map sits in my GIS computer, not printed out yet because I'm going to change hopefully all the colors, and I'd like to run those prints at once. And then finally, the parking issue. And yes, there is a change in the parking. So currently, our multifamily runs the gamut at based on the bedrooms. This one just sets it at, after 2 bedrooms, you provide 2 parking spaces. So 3 bedrooms, provide another parking space. So if the council wants to make the change, my recommendation is actually making a change on the guest parking, because that's typically where you're going to run into issues. And also, parking is one of those, specifically in the residential applications, the housing element, which was adopted in December before any of this. There's a specific mandate of reducing government barriers to housing. Parking is actually one of the largest barriers to housing production in terms of meeting the parking standards, which is why there are developers out there that would gladly trade in a 1 deed restricted unit to get the density bonus standards that the state requires, which is just 1 space per unit. There's and developers do that. That's in order to avoid parking, they'll just not even hit the density that they're looking for and just want the parking standards to it. Yes, there is a reduction, but again, if you want to adjust it, my suggestion would be to adjust the guest parking spaces. It's 1 to 5, adjust that to 1 to 4. That usually typically will add that 1 additional parking space as required.
Any last comments from anybody? In that case, I think you have direction from us.
And again, we are trying to be transparent in terms of delivering this item back to the DRC and the Planning Commission. We've held 2 meetings with the Planning Commission. This is a very large update. And
I know.
It's simply because
It's huge.
our code has not been updated in some time. The hope is this becomes now a yearly update instead, just to codify changes in state law, but also to come back to you as the decision maker to say what works and what doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, let's fix it.
Formerly, I was on what was called the Board of Architectural Review. It's now the DRC. We do have a design document, but it was all in black and white. I don't think it had any color in it. So updating that design document with a lot of pictures and colors and guides would be extremely useful for anybody coming in for signs or permits or anything else.
That's the intention of the handbook, is really codify it and then work with the DRC to give us a really good working handbook, and we use that to give to applicants as their major guide.
The only thing I would caution you is taking away all of the options. Okay? So the DRC is still saying this is what we'd like to see. I think they need to have some of that. It cannot, a design cannot be completely objective, is what I'll tell you. That's my opinion anyway. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Good work.
Closing comments from anybody in the council? In that case, we are, wow, look at that. We are now adjourned at 8:59.